Emily found the old wooden box in the attic of her late grandmother's house. She had been here for hours, sorting through boxes of old photographs, yellowed newspapers, and clothes that still carried the faint scent of lavender. Her grandmother had passed away just 2 weeks ago, and Emily had been given the responsibility to clean the house before it was sold. Emily wiped her hands on her jeans and reached for a small wooden box at the back of the attic. It was different from the other's darker wood, a faded brass lock and initials carved on top, H. Curious, she tried the lock, but it clicked open easily. Inside were a few trinkets, an old locket, a pair of spectacles, and a single envelope. The envelope was sealed, and on it, in neat cursive, were the words, "To the one who finds this when the time is right." Emily frowned. The handwriting wasn't her grandmother's. Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter written in deep blue ink. "If you are reading this, this house has seen more love and loss than you can imagine. My name is Henry Waverley, and in the year 1942, I made a choice that changed my life forever. This is my story, and perhaps it will change yours too." Emily's breath caught. She had never heard of Henry Waverley, yet something in those words pulled her in, like an invisible thread tugging at her heart. The letter continued. "I was 22 when the war began. I had a sweetheart. Her name was Rose. She had hair the color of honey and eyes that saw right through a man's soul. We were inseparable until the day I received my orders to leave for France." Emily could almost picture it, a young man in uniform, holding hands with a girl in a summer dress, both knowing time was running out. "The night before I left, I promised her I'd return. I gave her my mother's locket, but life has a cruel way of testing promises." The rain outside grew heavier, like the sky itself was listening to Henry's story. Emily kept reading, her hands tightening around the fragile paper. Henry described the horrors of the battlefield, the mud, the cold, the constant fear of not seeing another sunrise. But through it all, he kept writing letters to Rose, dozens of them. "Every night I wrote to her. I told her about the stars over the trenches, the sound of the wind in the ruins, the way I missed the scent of her hair." But weeks passed, then months, and I received nothing back. Emily's chest tightened. She turned the page. One day, a letter came. My hands shook as I opened it. But it wasn't from Rose. It was from her sister. She told me Rose had fallen ill and was gone. Emily felt her throat tighten. The rain outside blurred the attic window, as if even the world wanted to hide its tears. Henry's letter went on. "I returned home after the war, but the world I knew was gone. I couldn't bring myself to go to Rose's grave. Instead, I came to this house, my uncle's home, and I stayed. I kept her locket locked away, along with this letter, waiting for someone, anyone who would understand." Emily sat back, her heart aching for a man she had never met. She looked at the locket in the box and carefully opened it. Inside was a tiny, faded picture of a young woman with honey-colored hair and a smile that looked like sunlight. And then Emily noticed something strange. Behind the photograph, hidden in the locket, was a folded piece of paper. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. It was another note. But this one wasn't from Henry. It was from Rose. Henry, if you're reading this, I am not gone. Not yet. But the doctors say I don't have much time. I wanted to see you one last time, but the world has made it impossible. If you love me, promise me you'll live your life, not for the war, not for grief, but for us. Always, Rose. Emily sat frozen. Her hands trembled as she realized the truth. Henry had lived his entire life, believing Rose had died before he returned, when in reality, she had been alive for at least a little while after. She whispered to herself, he never knew. The rain kept falling, and the attic seemed to grow colder. Emily tucked the note back into the locket and sat in silence. The weight of decades-old love and regret pressing down on her. The next day, she went to the local records office in the small town. She searched for Henry Waverly, and sure enough, there he was. Born in 1920, died in 1989. His obituary was brief. A quiet man, survived by no children, remembered by few. But there was something else. Under Rose's name, Emily found a marriage certificate. But it wasn't to Henry. It was to another man. Dated 1947, 2 years after the war ended. Emily's chest ached. Rose had married someone else. Was it because she thought Henry was gone forever, or because life had forced her into another path? The deeper Emily dug, the more she uncovered pieces of their story. She found an old photograph in the town's historical archives. Rose on her wedding day, her smile softer, almost sad, and around her neck, the same locket. Emily felt her throat tighten. Rose had kept it. Even after marrying someone else, she had kept Henry's locket. That night, Emily returned to her grandmother's house and sat in the attic again. She read Henry's letter over and over, imagining the lonely years he had spent in that very house, never knowing the truth. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend Claire. "Em, are you still at your grandma's?" "Yeah," Emily replied quietly. "Listen, I know it's late, but my uncle said he remembers a man named Henry who used to sit by the lake every Sunday. He might have known him." Emily's heart leaped. Maybe there was still someone alive who could fill in the missing pieces. The next morning, Emily drove out to the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the pale winter sky. On a worn wooden bench near the shore sat an elderly man feeding the ducks. "Excuse me," Emily said softly. "Are you Mr. Thomas?" The man looked up, his face weathered with time. "Yes, and you must be Helen's granddaughter." I knew Henry well. Emily sat beside him, the cold breeze brushing her hair. "Can you tell me about him?" Thomas smiled faintly. Henry was a man of quiet sorrows. He never spoke much about the war, but he always carried this look in his eyes, like he was waiting for someone who never came. Every Sunday, he'd sit here, staring at the path, as if hoping she'd appear. Emily swallowed hard. "Rose?" Thomas nodded slowly. He loved her till his last breath. I think she loved him too, in her own way. Life just got in the way. The wind rustled through the bare trees. Thomas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a faded handkerchief. He left this with me before he died. Told me to give it to someone who might understand. Emily unfolded the cloth. Inside was a second letter, sealed and untouched. On the front, in Henry's handwriting, were the words, "For Rose, if she ever comes." Emily's breath caught. She had found the last letter, the one Henry had written but never sent. She broke the seal, her hands trembling, and began to read. "My dearest Rose, if this letter ever reaches you, know that I waited. I waited every day, through every season, through every year. I waited because I believed you would come. And even if you never do, I want you to know you were my only home. I forgive the world for keeping us apart, but I will never stop loving you. Always yours, Henry." Emily closed her eyes, clutching the letter to her chest. The lake, the fading winter light, all of it seemed to hold his words in the air. She knew what she had to do next. She had to find Rose's grave and deliver the letter herself. 2 days later, Emily stood at the gates of the small cemetery on the edge of town. The sky was gray, and a soft mist clung to the air. In her hands, she carried Henry's unsent letter, carefully tucked inside the same faded envelope he had sealed decades ago. She walked slowly among the rows of weathered headstones, her boots crunching on the gravel path. Finally, she found it, a small stone with the name Rose Carter engraved in delicate letters. The date of her passing was 1978. Emily knelt beside the grave, her fingers brushing away the moss that had begun to creep over the name. For a moment, the silence of the cemetery seemed to press in on her, broken only by the distant caw of a crow. She took a deep breath and began speaking softly, as if Rose could somehow hear her. "Henry waited for you, Rose. He thought you were gone, but you weren't. You never stopped loving him, either." Emily placed the envelope at the base of the headstone, her eyes blurring with tears. "This is from him. He wanted you to have it, even if it's too late." A sudden gust of wind swept through the cemetery, lifting the edges of her coat. The trees above swayed, their bare branches creaking. Emily could almost imagine it was Henry himself, standing there, watching, finally letting go. As she turned to leave, she noticed something unusual. A small bench a few yards away, facing Rose's grave. The wood was worn smooth, as if someone had sat there countless times. Emily's heart ached as she realized the truth. Henry had been here. Even though he believed she had died before he returned, somehow he had still come. Back at her grandmother's house that evening, Emily placed the wooden box and a copy of both letters together in a drawer. She knew she couldn't let their story fade into dust. She opened her laptop and began to type. The last letter. The story of Henry and Rose. Each word she wrote felt like stitching together pieces of a broken heart, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever lost someone they loved. Months later, the story was published online. Thousands of people read it, many writing back to say it reminded them of their own lost loves, their own moments of what if. And one evening, as Emily sat by the lake where she had first met Thomas, she thought she saw a figure sitting on the bench, a man in an old-fashioned coat, his head bowed, a faint smile on his lips. When she blinked, he was gone, but the bench remained, and somehow she knew Henry had finally found his way home.